Hello ladies and gentlemen, in this video tutorial I would like to show you these tiny elements, these tiny details that sometimes are a little bit tough. So I don't want to explain more about this video tutorial because I'm going to explain you how to paint these wraps, how to paint good, how to paint non-metallic metals on a detail and on the axe. And something else, I'm going to show you how to blend with your brush, because I heard that a lot of people don't want to use the airbrush, or the airbrush is a bit tough, or they don't want to buy an airbrush, but they want to paint only with the brush. So because you can do it, I'm going to explain you some tips and some tricks to do it, okay? As for these wraps, if you are watching this video tutorial, you'll see that I'm painting the outlinings, these edge highlights, okay? And when you have done everything about the edging, these edge highlights, you'll see that you discover you have painted at the same time the outlinings, these dark linings between every wrap. So then when you have painted everything around these wraps, then the next steps are you have to create like a tension on this. So to paint this tension, you have to paint some layers with more light, thicker layers. The size of this area should be thicker, bigger on the bottom of this. And you will keep the shadow only on the top, okay? And then the next steps will be paint the next layers only in the middle of this, to reinforce the feeling that this is like a cylinder, right? So you are watching on the video everything about that. Remember that the edging is really important. If you have painted really thin, the result will be much better than if you paint a bit thicker. And as you see, you can paint with texture, without, you can create scratches, but the most important is paint everything in the middle, just to reinforce this idea. With the next layers, if you see, I'm repainting again the edging. So don't worry about if you have done the edging, that means that you have done the first or two layers, but you can continue painting if you want to get more contrast or if you want to define a bit more. So with the edging, you can define and get more contrast than you can imagine. After that, I'm going to show you the difference between one side and the other side to show you that only with the edging within these next steps, these next layers, you will get more volume, more contrast, and you will define much better, as you can see now. Okay, the right side, it's the different when you have done everything. My idea is just start as the left and continue painting in the middle and repainting the edging on the top, and you will have something like that. I hope will be easier and you will understand much better now, okay? And now about this item, this is the end of the axe, this detail, what happened about that? I don't know if it's kind of metallic, if it's kind of bones. To me, it's like a piece of wood. So how you have to paint this? Why I decide to paint this material? It's just because we don't find this material in this model, or if you find it's just a bit. So I thought that if I repeat painting with non-metallic metal, maybe it could look exactly the same, a bit boring. And because this is an orc, and I think one piece of wood will be much better, interesting than if I paint everything with metallics. Because this guy have a lot of bones on him. So, as for this material, what do you have to do? My recommend it's paint with tiny dots, painting these lines. It's like painting straight lines, but discontinue. Okay, like you can see. At the beginning, I've decided to paint with this kind of greens because I think it would be more interesting play with different colors. If you start with these greens, then you will paint with different browns, with more orange or magenta, without green. And the result will be more interesting than if you only paint with, for example, brown. Because at the end you will paint with brown going to the highest white, right? So to the highest light, or maybe ivory, because you loved ivory. So then for sure you will have a lot of contrast, but you didn't play with the color contrast. So in my opinion, if you play, for example, with this kind of greens, some of them with more blue, some of them with more yellow, like you see now, and then you play with another color with more orange or magenta, like this one, you will get more interesting results. So you are playing with different colors, and at the end will look more interesting with more details, and for sure you will get more contrast because you are playing with the complementary colors. You don't have to play always with the pure red or the perfect red or magenta when you are painting with green, but for sure you can play with some orange, with magentas and these kind of greens, and you will get more interesting contrast. And the idea is just create this kind of holes, this kind of texture, this kind of noodles, this idea. So, and this is the way as I paint the good. If in some moments you feel that this is horrible and then you have seen my model, it's because now you're watching this video tutorial with the top zoom that we can do. Okay, so this is huge. If you compare my fingers with the element, it's really tiny. So this idea is to show you everything on the camera, because we're trying to improve on everything. On the video cameras, painting with more zoom, with the video editing, with the voices, we want to bring our best level. So this is only because you are helping us a lot. So we want to bring the best from us. So again, thank you very much for that. So now, this is another kind of non-metallic metal. Some of you know how to paint a short because it's difficult at the beginning, but then once time you understand the trick, it's easier. But what happens when you have to paint something more like this, with a lot of details, with something that is not like a flat surface? You have to deconstruct this in geometrical shapes. For example, if you can imagine that this is a cube, just that, you will see two angles, the top angle and the front angle, or the top shape and the front shape. So then, once time you understand this, you will see that the top should have more light, and then the front should have light, but never exactly the same as the top. So once time you understand this, you can understand that the top will have a lot of light. You can follow the forms like this item have, and then the front, you can think that this is like a cylinder. So you have to paint everything, every detail around that. It's like a 360, right? So you have to paint everything, not like a flat surface. So to think about this, the trick will be paint at the beginning everything, and then the next layers moving to the center. So with this, you will get more contrast because you will have more previous colors as shadows, more previous base coats as shadows, and then more midtones with more saturated color and more light. And then on this, I'm going to explain you how to blend with the brush. The trick will be blend with a 50-50, 50% water and 40% paint, or 60% water and 40% paint. Okay, it's like 50-50 or 60-40, more or less something like that. So never use exactly the same dilution I explained you on the airbrush, around 90% water and thinner and 10% paint, because you will waste a lot of time. So nobody will see the glazes. with airbrush, because it's a quickly item, a quickly tool, so I think you will paint quickly, faster, so it will be easy. But in that case, please, more or less around 60-40 to me is the top. So what happened about that? You have to paint the contrast. You have to paint every layer lighter to get this feeling. And if you see, sometimes I paint tiny dots to create these reflections. Why? Because I want to represent this material. So I need to break some rules and paint lights in some places that maybe you can imagine. Sometimes only with some dots it's enough to define this element. For example, here you see I've painted some random dots in some places. I usually use the edgings, the angles, to define better the outlinings and define the elements or the details, like in that case. So for example, only with these two layers and these tiny dots with this contrast, I think will work perfectly. And when you have something like that you want to blend, I recommend you use this dilution. And the trick will be paint from the shadow to the light. And you have to use exactly the same color that you used on the light, okay? Exactly the same. So now I'm going to paint with something lighter, like this white or close to white. This is up to you, okay? If you use more white, it will be more interesting on the camera than if you use another ceiling. For example, when I'm painting non-metallics, I like to use pure white as my ceiling. Never I'm going to use this pure white on the skin or another material, because if I have two different materials with the same ceiling, the same light, at the end will look the same. So I keep this highlight only to this non-metallic. And then once time I've painted this kind of random dots to represent these reflections, my idea is blend. So how you have to blend? As you see now, I paint with some touches from outside of this dot, from this mid-tone or shadow to the center, to this dot, with exactly the same color, with another dilution, with like a 60-40%, okay? And this is the way I blend. Now with this axe, I'm going to explain you better and with more time. So I think you will learn perfectly how to paint non-metallic metals after this. So first, define with a line. Define the area where you want to represent with this polished metallic. Because the other area, I'm going to use rust, scratches, more loose brush strokes to represent something different. And the idea when you paint the non-metallic metal, remember, the idea is play between light and shadow, and now you will understand why. And you will see what is the result. For this non-metallic metal, I want to paint, or I thought to paint to the camera because it was a box art, and I thought that will be much more interesting if I decide to focus everything to see perfectly on the camera than if I paint with less contrast to see better on the hands. At the end of the results, I love it because it was perfect to the camera and perfect to see on the hand. But at the beginning, the way I used my brush and the light, it's to focus everything on the camera. So I've painted with pure white in a huge area to burn the light on the camera. So you will see. I want to explain this too because I think it's different. That means that you have a lot of different ways to paint non-metallics. That means that you don't have to paint always with the same light or always with the same colors or always with the same effect. Because on this metallic, I want to paint with a texture too, and I'm going to paint some thin lines to create the texture on this weapon. Like the Captain America shield. These kind of thin lines. So like you see now. So I want to paint this because it's just I want to explain you more. I want to give you more ideas. I want to bring you more tools to paint on different ways. So for that, I want to say that you have a lot of possibilities to paint non-metallic metals. And as you see, I paint in some places with the next layers, but I don't repaint everything. So I keep a bit from the previous base coat to get the gradient, to have this gradient. So it's the only way to blend perfectly then with the airbrush, or do something more easier for us when we want to blend with airbrush. Paint some layers, and then when you have painted some layers, you have a nice sketch, is the moment to blend with the brush if you feel that is necessary. In that case, because I wanted to show you how to paint with the brush everything on this video tutorial, I did it, and I'm going to show you. As you see, I continue painting in the middle of this gradient, in the middle of this base coat to get this gradient. If in some moments I repainted everything or more than I should, it's because I thought that I have to paint with more layers, with more light. And for sure, this is a sketch, so you can continue painting and repaint it if you need, okay? So that means if in some moment you feel that one layer it's too dark to the area that you have it, just remove it. Paint with the color that you are painting now. Just that. Or paint with the previous one. I recommend you with exactly you have now, because it will be easier, because that means that you will paint more layers there, so you will get more contrast. So as for the glazes, or this way to blend, this is the way. So use the different dilution like 50-50 or 60-40, and start outside in the dark area and move to the light with exactly the same color, right? Because once time you paint or you do this brush stroke, you will stop in the dot or the area, the room that you have this color. So this is like a safety area. So you won't make mistakes because you have exactly the same color. So if you drop more pigment than you should, nobody will see, because you have 100% this color as background. So it's perfect. So this is the way I use. It's just make another mix, okay, outside of this, blend 3 or 4 layers, or if you need more, paint more. Always going to the top to the bottom, okay, to the area where you have this color, this high light, and then under this, from the bottom to the top. So the idea is, if you have one layer here, you have one color here, the idea is move the brushstroke from here to inside, and then from here to inside, because here you have your safety area, okay? And now I'll start to use more white or close to white or pure white, because I want to get more and more contrast to show you the difference. The trick is that you have to use something closer to white, because the metallics works on that way. And this kind of dots that you can see on the edging, it's because I want to get more brights. It's like a freehand everything. So for that, remember, I recommend you use the airbrush, but not to paint everything, because sometimes it could be boring. And I want to explain you how to paint with the brush, because at the end you will enjoy, I think, more. And you will paint more models, because this is your hobby. You have to enjoy painting models. Remember that, this is the most important, because sometimes the feedback about a model, it's only when you have done. So if you didn't finish a model, then never you will feel the feedback about, hey, I am improving, so I'm doing well. So please try to finish models, better or worse, don't worry, but finish them, okay? So this is the way I used to paint the non-metallics, a different non-metallic, and I hope it's interesting, all this knowledge that I'm giving you here, and I think you will improve a lot. As for this area, sometimes people think that when you paint with less contrast, with less information, with at the end less, it's like you have painted worse. This is wrong. Sometimes you need to play with some places with more information than other places. Sometimes you need to paint with more layers, more contrast in some places than others. That means that on this axe, everything works together. So if I paint with this polished non-metallic metal on this area that I'm painting now, at the end I'm losing information because I need to get the contrast between this black color and this white. Both together will work perfectly to get this feeling, this non-metallic metal. However, if I paint with the same light, the same colors, the same contrast on this area, then the result will be worse because I'm losing information. I'm losing the possibility to play with this contrast, this huge contrast. Okay? So please remember, less information in some places or less contrast or play with darker colors doesn't mean that you are painting worse. Okay? Sometimes you have to decide what places are more interesting or where you need to paint with more attention or more contrast. Okay? In that case, I want to paint with a loose brush stroke to get rust, to get some scratches, something like that. So for that, I'm painting like this. I think when you see the result at the end, it's more interesting. But this is just my opinion, it's my taste, just that. I never am going to say that you have to paint on that way. This is just to give you different tools. And as for the rust, sometimes people think that it's not a perfect rust or the rust works on a different way. So if you feel that you need to do something completely realistic, please first look for information on Google or Box about this and then try to copy as better as possible to do it more realistic. If you only want to add some orange, some scratches, something like that because you like it, this is fantasy, do it, just that, okay? So you have both possibilities. I do on that way because to me it's realistic and it's more interesting to me than sometimes that the rust is with different colors or with a low contrast or a low saturation. I want to play with this saturation because it's more interesting to me. For that you can see a lot of colors on my models. At the end you are painting to yourself, so you have to enjoy with the result. If you don't like it, change to a new one, change for new information. So, for example, now I'm painting with this kind of dilution. I explained you that like a 50-50 to not blend perfectly, but blend a bit in some places and get more transitions, something more smooth, and get different results on this. Okay. So with this, I have to say goodbye and see you in the next video tutorial. I hope you have enjoyed watching this video tutorial and you will learn for sure a lot. So again, thank you very much for your huge support and I'll see you in the next video tutorial or next streaming. So again, thank you very much for your huge support because without your help, this can't be possible. Again, thank you very much and enjoy watching this. See you!